They came through the veil on a Tuesday. That is the mundane detail no one ever puts in the history books. That the first confirmed alien contact happened on a Tuesday afternoon, at 14:07 GST. While half of Hyderabad was stuck in traffic on the Outer Ring Road, and a man named Arjun Kumar was eating cold rice out of a stainless steel tiffin box in a parking garage beneath a mobile phone shop. He had been watching the shop for 11 days. His back ached. His coffee had gone cold 3 hours ago. He was on his 175th attempt to make contact with an organization that officially did not exist. He was not thinking about aliens. He was thinking about his father. The thing is, most people imagine first contact will announce itself. A ship the size of a moon blotting out the sun, radio signals that decode into prime numbers, something cinematic. What actually happened was quieter and more terrible. The Kavari simply appeared in low orbit, all 47 vessels, and began transmitting on every frequency simultaneously. Not a greeting, not a warning, a census. They were cataloging the planet's infrastructure, its communications architecture, its military grid. By the time governments decoded what the transmissions were, the Kavari had already mapped every data network on Earth, with the same brisk thoroughness a surveyor maps land before a building goes up. They didn't attack. They didn't need to. Arjun found out about first contact the same way most of the planet did. His phone started screaming. He sat in that parking garage and watched the news unfold on a cracked screen while the last of his cold coffee sat beside him, and he felt something he could not immediately name. Not fear, exactly. Something older than fear. The sensation of a horizon that used to be empty now containing a shape you cannot measure. His phone buzzed. A message. No sender, no number, just 4 words. Come upstairs. Now. Please. He looked the full phone shop above him, finished the last grain of rice in his tiffin, clicked the lid shut, and went upstairs. The shop was a front. Below it, reached through a storeroom false floor, was a room of blank walls, and humming servers and 6 people who looked like they hadn't slept in 3 days, which they hadn't. The man at the center of the room was called Damodar. He was 63 years old, built like a retired wrestler, and he had the exhausted eyes of someone who had been planning for this contingency for 20 years, and was now discovering that planning and reality share very little real estate. He looked at Arjun for a long moment. Your father's clearance code, he said, 116. You put it on your application. I put it on all 175 applications. The first 174 we ignored because we didn't believe you knew what it meant. The 175th we couldn't ignore anymore. Damodar studied him. Do you know what your father was? He was Trinetra, Arjun said. The best one you had. And someone killed him for it. Damodar was quiet for a moment. Someone was doing a lot of work in that sentence and they both knew it. He turned back to the screens where 47 Kavari ships hung in low orbit like a new constellation. We need people who can move without being tracked, Damodar said. The Kavari have been inside our satellite networks for 18 hours. They can see any vehicle with a transponder, any phone with a signal, any person wearing biometric tech. They are very thorough. Very patient. He paused. Arjun, they are building something. We don't know what. We know it requires our cooperation, and we know it will not require it much longer. Arjun looked at the screens, at the ships, at the census data scrolling past in real time, every human city reduced to data points, traffic patterns, population density, resource flows. What do you need me to do, he said. That was how it started. The training was not what the films made it. There were no elaborate obstacle courses, no montages set to swelling music. Trinetra in the post-contact world operated out of repurposed basements and the back rooms of ordinary buildings, because the Kavari could see anything with a power signature large enough to register. You trained in the dark, you ran without a tracker. You learned to go analog in a world that had forgotten what analog meant. Dead drops, hand signals, paper maps, the kind of tradecraft that belonged to the last century but had become, suddenly and urgently, relevant again. There were 6 of them in Arjun's cohort. He was the oldest at 29. The youngest was a woman named Lena, who had previously been a competitive free diver and moved through enclosed spaces with an unsettling quietness, like something that had learned to breathe in smaller amounts than the rest of them. There was Kishore, who could fix anything electronic and had a persistent, infuriating habit of humming to himself when he was nervous. There was Uma, who had a doctoral degree in xenolinguistics she had been completing on the day of first contact, and who now found herself working to understand Kavari communication patterns rather than defending her thesis. There was Pasha, who was faster and stronger than any of the rest of them, and who made absolutely sure they all knew it. And there was a man called Sham who was quiet and careful, and who Arjun noticed always seemed to know things slightly before he was told them. He also met Samira. She was not in the cohort. She was a psychologist assigned to assess the recruits, and she had a direct way of looking at you that made it feel like she was reading text you didn't know you'd written. She was the one who told Arjun, after his third assessment session, that he carried his grief at a particular angle, forward-leaning, she said, like a man walking into wind. You use it to move, she said. That's good. Most people use it to stop. He asked her what she used to move. She looked at him for a moment, and something passed across her face that he could not read. The same thing, she said, just from a different direction. They fell into a careful, unspoken understanding of each other, the kind that builds between people who recognize the shape of a shared loss without needing to name it. He told her his real name, Gopi, in a moment that surprised him, because he hadn't told anyone that name in years. She received it quietly, like something she would keep safe. He did not know then what it cost her to hear it. The Kavari's first formal communication came 63 days after arrival. It was not a greeting. It was a list of requirements. They would receive, they said, certain resources. They would cease certain activities. They would provide access to certain facilities. They would not be harmed provided compliance was maintained. The communication was clinical, comprehensive, and utterly devoid of malice, which was somehow worse than malice would have been. Malice implies you register as significant. This read like a property management notice sent to tenants who had failed to maintain the premises. They don't think we're a threat, Uma said, in the briefing room, translating the subtext as much as the text. They don't think we're capable of being one. This isn't occupation. It's administration. What's the difference? Pasha asked. Administration doesn't require you to keep them afraid, Uma said. They don't maintain fear. They maintain compliance. Two very different things. Arjun was watching a piece of footage on his screen. One of the Kavari had been photographed on the ground. They were sending survey teams, small ones, moving through cities with instruments that looked like elongated tuning forks. The one in the footage was standing at the edge of a marketplace, watching humans negotiate over vegetables. And its posture was the posture of someone watching a documentary about a species they found mildly interesting. Curious, remote, not cruel. That was the word he kept coming back to, remote. They were remote in the way of something that has never been touched, never been hurt, never been forced to understand that the world can surprise you. They were efficient and meticulous and comprehensive, and they had, as far as anyone could tell, no word in their communication system for the concept of stubbornness. That was the gap. Damodar had been saying it for weeks, but it was Arjun who finally found the language for it. Sitting in a car outside a building the Kavari had commandeered as a data relay station, watching the survey teams move with their uncanny precision. They're planning for what we'll do, he said to Lena, who was in the passenger seat eating a biscuit with the focused calm of someone who had learned to eat whenever food was available. But they're planning for what a rational opponent would do, someone who weighs costs and benefits. And we don't, Lena said. It was not a question. We apply, he said, 174 times to something that keeps telling us no. We go back into a building we know is watched because we left something behind. We walk into a fire to carry someone out even when the math says we won't make it. He watched the Kavari survey team complete its circuit with mechanical, perfect timing. They can model everything we're likely to do. They can't model the things we do for no good reason. Lena finished the biscuit. That's either our greatest advantage, she said, or a very elaborate explanation for why humans are bad at giving up. Maybe both, Arjun said. The first mission was small. A data relay. One of the Kavari's ground stations had been established in a warehouse district outside Vizag. It was not a military installation. It was in the Kavari's taxonomy infrastructure. It handled about 11% of the real-time surveillance data they were collecting on the eastern seaboard. The objective was not to destroy it. It was to introduce a delay. 6 seconds of lag in the data stream, timed precisely, would create a blind spot through which 3 Trinetra operatives could move without being logged. The window would be used once. It had to be used perfectly. Arjun went in. He moved through the warehouse district the way Damodar had taught him. Phone off, no transponder, dressed in clothes that had been air-dried to avoid the small electromagnetic signature of drier heating elements. He moved when the wind moved, stopped when it stopped, used the noise of the city to cover his own. The Kavari ground station was a cluster of equipment that looked like oversized coral. pale, branching, faintly luminescent in the dark. 2 Kavari operators tended it. They moved in unhurried circuits. They did not vary their pattern. That was the thing. They did not vary their pattern. Arjun thought about his father, about a photograph he'd carried since he was 6 years old, creased and soft at the edges. His father in a white shirt with the collar open, laughing at something off-camera, completely unguarded, completely alive. He thought about the 175 applications. He thought about the number 116 that he had written and rewritten so many times it had ceased to mean anything, and then begun to mean everything. He placed the device. He moved. He was out before the delay ended. In the debrief, Damodar looked at the data they'd recovered from the 6-second window and went very quiet. "What?" Arjun said. "They're not collecting intelligence," Damodar said. "They're collecting compliance data. How quickly commands are obeyed. Where hesitation occurs. They're mapping our decision-making patterns. Learning where we slow down." He looked up. "They're preparing to ask us for something larger. How long? 3 weeks, maybe 4. 3 weeks became 2. The Kavari's second formal communication arrived on a Wednesday, and it was not a list this time. It was a request, phrased as a request, though the distinction from a demand was largely grammatical, for access to Trinetra's archives, all of them. Every field agent identity, every operation, every network contact from the past 40 years. If they gave it, the Kavari would have the complete map of India's human intelligence infrastructure. Every face, every cover, every person who had, at any point, chosen to work in the shadow for reasons that had nothing to do with calculation and everything to do with something the Kavari apparently could not scan for. Damodar refused. He did it quietly in a one-line transmission, and then he looked at his team and said, "We have perhaps 72 hours before they escalate. What have we got?" What they had was Arjun's discovery from the 6-second window. Not much, but enough. The Kavari relay network had a sequencing architecture. It was elegant, it was redundant, and it had one structural characteristic that betrayed a certain blind spot. The Kavari built their networks on the assumption of rational actors, systems that would behave predictably under pressure, that would default to self-preservation, that would not sacrifice a node to save a network. Their redundancy protocols assumed each node would protect itself. What the Kavari had apparently never modeled was the possibility that a node would willingly go dark, would accept its own loss for the sake of the larger picture. "We don't fight them," Arjun said, in a room full of exhausted people. "We make them think they've won. We give them something to find." He explained it slowly. It was not a subtle plan. It was in fact almost childishly direct, which he thought was probably the right approach. He was going to walk into one of their relay stations, allow himself to be detected, and transmit what appeared to be the full Trinetra archive. Actually a beautifully constructed shell of plausible, internally consistent, completely fabricated data that Uma had spent 3 weeks building. He would be captured. He would be questioned. He would, he hoped, survive long enough for the false data to propagate through the Kavari relay network, creating a picture of an Indian intelligence infrastructure that was far less capable than it actually was, and which had been, by implication, fully disclosed, and therefore no longer worth pursuing. "They'll know it's fake eventually," Pasha said. "Yes," Arjun said, "but not for a while. And in the meantime, Uma said slowly, understanding opening across her face. "They stop looking." "They stop looking," Arjun said, "because the administrative logic of the situation says there's nothing left to find. We give them a complete picture. They close the file. And then we're invisible." Damodar was very quiet for a long time. "Arjun," he said, "if they discover it's fabricated while you're in there." "I know," Arjun said. "Your father." "I know," Arjun said again more quietly. Damodar looked at him. There was something in his eyes that was not quite sadness and not quite pride, but lived in the neighborhood of both. He picked up the bottle of whiskey that sat on the corner of his desk. He had a habit of keeping one there, unopened, which Arjun had always found puzzling, and he looked at it for a moment. Then he set it down. "Samira profiled you," Damodar said. "She said you were the only one in the cohort who could genuinely hold 2 incompatible truths in your head at the same time." "What truths?" "That something matters enormously, and that you might have to lose it anyway." He paused. "She said the others could do one or the other. Hold the importance or accept the loss. You could hold both." Arjun thought about Samira, about the way she'd looked at him the last time they spoke, 3 days ago. When he'd told her the outline of what he was planning, she had gone very still. Not the stillness of shock, the stillness of someone bracing against something they already knew was coming. I need to talk to her, he said. She's not here, Damodar said. Something was wrong. He could feel it the way you feel weather changing. Damodar, he said. Where is she? The silence that followed was the kind that contains a whole architecture of things unsaid. Damodar put his hands flat on the table. He looked like a man about to deliver a blow he has been holding for a long time and can no longer hold. Samira Sheikh, Damodar said. Not Samira Rao. Her real name is Samira Sheikh. She was assigned to this project 8 months before First Contact. By someone who knew First Contact was coming. By someone who had been in contact with the Kavari for 3 years. And had agreed to facilitate their initial intelligence gathering in exchange for certain assurances about their own position afterward. Arjun was very still. She was sent to assess you, Damodar said. Specifically you. Your father's clearance code had been flagged. Whoever sold us out knew the code existed and knew it might be used. They needed to know if you were Raghuvir's son and if you were dangerous. She was. He stopped. She was reporting on me. Yes. To who? The name Damodar gave him hit like something physical. Sham. Quiet, careful Sham who always seemed to know things slightly before he was told them. Who had been in the cohort not as a recruit but as a watcher. Who had, Arjun now understood with the sour clarity of hindsight, been positioned to monitor every single one of them from the inside. Who had poisoned? The word arrived fully formed, and Arjun forced himself not to look at the whiskey bottle on the desk. Had poisoned the bottle that Damodar was supposed to drink from at the graduation ceremony 2 weeks ago. The bottle Sampra had suggested giving as a gift. Damodar was alive only because he had a habit of not opening bottles he kept for morale. He had kept the thing on the desk for 3 months. He had intended to open it at Acharya's next visit, which had not yet happened. Acharya, who was dead, killed in his convoy the same day Sham had arranged a parallel distraction, and who Arjun had been framed for killing because he was the last person logged in Acharya's security perimeter. It unfolded like a map being unrolled. He could see it, all the elegance of it. Not Kavari elegance, human elegance, the particular viciousness of someone who knows exactly which threads to pull and when. Where is Sham now? Arjun said. His voice was very flat. We don't know. Lena is tracking him. Damodar looked at him carefully. And Samara? Arjun thought about the way she had looked at him when he told her the plan. The way she'd gone still. The way she'd said in a voice that carried something he hadn't been able to name. Be careful. Just that. 2 words, entirely insufficient, carrying a weight he now understood. She tried to warn me, he said. She just didn't have words for it. She was caught between 2 things, Damodar said. Whatever she was sent here to do, and whatever she became while she was doing it. Those are not always the same. No, Arjun said, they're not. He went anyway. He went into the Kavari relay station, with the false archive loaded on a device that Kishore had built, and that Lena had carried to the handoff point. Through 4 checkpoints, and 2 Kavari survey corridors, and a flooded underpass that required swimming. He went in wearing nothing that transmitted. He went in with the photograph of his father in the inside pocket of his jacket. Not for luck exactly, more as a point of reference. A reminder of what a person could choose. The Kavari detected him 11 minutes in. He had expected 8. The extra 3 minutes had allowed him to get further than the plan required, which meant the upload was already 40% complete. When the first Kavari operative appeared at the end of the corridor, they were taller than any photograph suggested. The images had flattened them somehow, made them look almost manageable. In person, in the narrow corridor of a commandeered data relay station, they were enormous and utterly calm, and the calm was the worst part. There was no aggression in the way the operative moved toward him. No alarm. Just the smooth, unhurried motion of something that had never been surprised in its life, and had no reason to start now. Arjun raised his hands. I have something for you, he said. The interrogation lasted 9 hours. The Kavari were thorough. They were, in their particular way, not cruel. They did not seem to understand cruelty as a tool, did not escalate beyond what they calculated necessary. They operated entirely on the logic of maximum efficiency. He was a data problem. They would extract what data he contained and process it. He let them work. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. Not the physical part, though that was difficult enough. The hardest part was maintaining the architecture of the false picture, while they picked at it from every angle, holding the fabricated reality in one part of his mind, while the rest of him breathed through it. Samira had told him he could hold 2 incompatible things. He thought about her saying it. He used it the way you use a handhold on a cliff face. Not because it's beautiful, but because it's there. He thought about his father. about what it means to be someone's son when the blueprint you were handed is complicated. He thought about Damodar's face when he said, "Be careful," the weight of a man who has already lost too much. He thought about Lena swimming through the flooded underpass in the dark, carrying a device the size of a paperback book that contained a fictional intelligence service built with 3 weeks of Uma's extraordinary, meticulous, furious ingenuity. The Kavari processed the archive. He watched them process it. They had him in a room with a transparency that let him see into the relay station's main chamber, which he suspected was deliberate, a calculation that visibility of their competence would further a sense of futility. He watched their operative interface with the data stream. He watched the false archive propagate. He counted beats. At hour 7, something changed in the operative's posture. A very small thing, a settling. The kind of movement a person makes when a question they've been holding gets answered. The archive was accepted. He closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his lids, he saw the photograph of his father, the collar, the laughter, the off-camera thing that had been funny enough to make a man look completely unguarded for 1 second. The Kavari released him at hour 9. Not freely, they were not offering freedom, they were reclassifying him. A fully disclosed asset, known, logged, administratively resolved. Releasing him cost them nothing, because in their model there was nothing left for him to hide. He was in their taxonomy, a closed file. He walked out into night air that smelled of rain and diesel and the particular smell of the city, at the hour when it stops performing being busy and just breathes. Kishore was waiting in an unmarked car 3 blocks away, humming to himself with a feverish, barely suppressed energy. He stopped humming when he saw Arjun's face. Started it again quieter as Arjun got in. Kishore said, "They took it," Arjun said. "Give it 48 hours. If Uma's architecture holds, they'll close the active collection file on Trinetra. We go invisible." Kishore let out a breath that was about half a prayer. "And Sham? That's what I need from you," Arjun said. "Tell me where Lena tracked him." Sham was not where Lena had tracked him. He was 3 buildings down in a different location, which was how Arjun knew Sham had made Lena's surveillance and was running a counter. It was elegant. It was careful. It was exactly the way Arjun himself would have done it. He understood something in that moment about the peculiar loneliness of knowing someone well enough to think like them, and still having to be their enemy. He found Sham in a service corridor behind a building that the Kavari had requisitioned as administrative space, which was either a coincidence or was not. Sham was moving toward a door. He had a device in his hand. He was very calm. He was calm right up until Arjun said his name. Sham stopped, did not turn immediately. There was a pause that contained a decision being made. Arjun could feel it, the calculus of a careful man running his options. Then he turned. He looked, Arjun thought, tired, not afraid. Just tired, the way someone looks when they've been carrying something heavy for a very long time and have stopped expecting to put it down. "You came back out," Sham said. "I did. The Kavari let you go. He was processing. That means they accepted. Uma's fake archive, yes." Something moved behind Sham's eyes. It took Arjun a moment to identify it. Respect. Reluctant and genuine. "That's a good play," Sham said. "Damodar's alive," Arjun said. "You miscalculated. He keeps his whiskey bottles unopened." Sham absorbed this. "You're here to bring me in." "I'm here to make sure you don't get to that door," Arjun said. "What's behind it?" "A direct Kavari communications line. I have a report to file." He said it without drama. "Just information. About the fake archive. About all of it. Everything I've collected since my assignment." He looked at Arjun steadily. "I know how this reads. I know what you think I am. What are you?" "Someone who made a different calculation than you did," Sham said. "I looked at 47 ships and I ran the numbers, and I decided the only survivable outcome was alignment. Cooperation. You can call it betrayal. From where I stand, it looked like the only door." "So you killed Samira," Arjun said. "The first crack. Small but there. She stopped being reliable," Sham said. "She had deviated from her parameters. She had stopped being willing to help you hurt people. She had become a liability. She had become a person," Arjun said, "which she always was. You just stopped calculating her that way." Sham's jaw tightened. "You're not going to let me reach that door." "No, and if I reach it anyway." "Then Nadia has 40 seconds to lock the Kavari comms node before you can upload," Arjun said. "She's been on it for the last 4 minutes. Since Lena called in your position. Since you spotted Lena and thought you'd run a counter and didn't notice me on the 3rd angle." He paused. "We've had 3 people on you since you left the secondary location. You ran your counter on one. You never looked for the 3rd. Sham was very still. "You're a careful man," Arjun said. But you're careful the way the Kavari are careful. You plan for what's rational, for what makes sense. You didn't plan for Kishore driving across town at 3 in the morning because I asked him to, and he did it because. Not for any good reason, just because I asked. Something moved in Shyam's face that was complicated and unresolved and had Arjun thought, probably always been there under the careful surface. It's over, Arjun said. Come in. Shyam looked at the door, looked back. Made a calculation that, for once, was not about alignment or survival or the number of ships in orbit, but about something smaller and older. He put the device in his pocket. She wrote you a letter, he said. V4. She left it in your locker. I don't know what it says. Arjun nodded. He took Shyam in quietly, without drama, the way the worst outcomes often end. Not with a confrontation, but with a tired man choosing the only door left. The Kavari closed their active collection file on Trinetra 39 hours later. Uma's architecture held. The false archive propagated through their network and settled into their administrative record as a complete, verified disclosure. By their logic, the Indian intelligence apparatus had been fully mapped, its capabilities assessed, its threat potential categorized at a level that did not require further engagement. They moved their attention elsewhere. They had a planet to administer. They were very thorough, very patient. They did not expect to be surprised. In the months that followed, Trinetra rebuilt itself inside the blind spot they had carved. New agents, new networks. A deliberate, painstaking reconstruction. Done in analog, done in the dark, done in the full knowledge that their invisibility had an expiration date. That eventually the Kavari would notice the discrepancy between what the archives showed and what they observed, and the window would close. They worked in that window the way humans have always worked in insufficient time and against insufficient odds, with a quality the Kavari had no word for and had apparently never thought to scan for. Arjun sat in the debrief room after it was over, after Damodars had finally opened the whiskey bottle. It turned out the bottle itself had been fine, and only the one given at the ceremony had been tampered, and passed it around the room, and people who had not slept properly in months made the kind of toasts that are mostly just relief dressed up in language. He had read Samira's letter. He had read it 3 times, standing by the locker, then folded it and put it in the same pocket as the photograph of his father. He had not cried. He had felt something that did not have a clean name. Grief and gratitude running together, the way rivers run together, and briefly you can see both colors before they become one thing. She had written, among other things, I don't know if there is a word in any language for what I became while I was trying to be what they sent me to be. But I think the closest is yours. He thought about that for a long time. He thought about it when Nadia briefed them on the next phase, about what they'd learned from the false archives propagation, the gaps in Kavari administrative logic, the places where their certainty created its own blindness. She spoke with the focused intensity of someone who has glimpsed something important and is working out its implications in real time. They're not invincible, she said. They're just very certain. And certainty is a kind of blindness. Certainty about what, Uma said, about us, about what we'll do, what we're capable of. They've built their whole administrative model on an assessment of human behavior that was accurate as far as it went. She paused. It just didn't go far enough. They modeled what we do for reasons. They missed what we do without them. Arjun looked out the window. Down in the street, a man was arguing with a fruit seller about the price of mangoes. 2 kids were chasing a dog that appeared to be thoroughly enjoying itself. A woman on a scooter was threading through traffic with a confidence that bordered on defiance. An ordinary afternoon in a city that had been surveyed and assessed and categorized and had absolutely no intention of behaving accordingly. Still, faintly, what's next? Damodar looked at Arjun. Arjun thought about his father, about the photograph in his pocket, creased and soft at the edges, about a man who had been many things, including a father, and whose son had just spent 9 hours in an alien interrogation, carrying a fictional reality in one half of his mind and the real one in the other, and had come out the far side and was now sitting in a room that officially did not exist, with people who had swum through flooded underpasses and driven across cities at 3 in the morning for no good reason, and were asking what came next. He pulled out his father's photograph, set it on the table. Let them see it, the white shirt, the collar, the laughter at something off camera, the complete and absolute aliveness of a man who had not yet been asked to choose. We keep going, Arjun said. We apply again. 176. Nobody laughed, nobody needed to. Outside, 47 ships hung in low orbit, thorough and patient, and entirely certain about what they were dealing with. They were wrong, of course. But they didn't know that yet.